Welcome to the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Edufaith Essentials is an educational podcast that provides essential information, resources, and tips about education, leadership, and topics about diverse learners. Diverse learners include students with disabilities who receive services under Section 504 or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, response to intervention and the multi-tiered system of support, English speakers of other languages, and related diverse learner categories. Edufaith Essentials' mission is to bring positive awareness and promote equity and inclusion in education by sharing information and topics about non-traditional learners. Edufaith Essentials' goal is to restore faith in education one student at a time by empowering listeners with knowledge, because we all know that knowledge is power, so let's be powerful. I am your host, Dr. Nakia, sending you good vibes and thanking you for joining me for another episode of the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Our November episode of the Edufaith Essentials podcast. We'll go ahead and get started with our Edufaith Inspirational Story. And this story is coming from Dallas, Texas, and it is all about the Happy Flower Bakery in Dallas that empowers students with disabilities from inside the school cafeteria. It is located inside the Notre Dame School of Dallas, which is a Catholic school dedicated to teaching students with disabilities to become independent. The founding teacher, Meredith Pace, has been a part of the staff for 14 years, and she has combined her love for baking with her desire to help students and started the Happy Flower Bakery, which is an after-school cookie club. Happy Flower began with 10 students, and they were learning to measure and mix and roll dough, and then it quickly grew into a bustling bakery operation. The popularity of Happy Flower spread through word of mouth, and the bakery is inside the cafeteria has officially become a business. It has become so busy that Pace recently hired her first part-time employee, Mr. Casey O'Brien, who is an employee with special needs. O'Brien likes to bake cookies. To give some context about the Happy Flower Bakery, students in the area must hold jobs at various local businesses as part of the school's curriculum, including partnerships with other businesses throughout the neighborhood. Happy Flower has now joined the lineup, offering students a new opportunity to gain valuable work experience and insights. Happy Flower now has about 20 members in the club, and Pace hopes that this is just the beginning and that she can take the online orders and the Happy Flower Bakery from the school cafeteria to an official storefront. What a wonderful story of inspiration and a way to show that value of students with special needs and how they can help support the community and help be a part of local businesses and share the cheer and the gift of wonderful bakery goods and cookies. That is our Edufaith Essential story for today, inspirational story, and I will have the link with the news story that is aligned with that story on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. Thank you, Ms. Meredith Pace, for your service to students with special needs, and thank you for turning your love for baking into a lesson, which is now a community outreach restaurant and program that supports not only special needs students, but give the gift of baking and desserts to the community. So kudos to you, Mrs. Pace, and Casey O'Brien, her part-time employee. I wish you all the best. Now let's dive into the dates to remember for the month of November. It is now November, the 11th month of the year. The year is really flying by. And as we continue with our fall dates and November dates, here are some dates that I want you to remember and recognize. November is National Career Development Month. It is also National Scholarship Month. We want to make sure that we recognize our cultures and diversity. November is American Indian and Alaska Native Heritage Month. It is also COPD Awareness Month, Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month, Alzheimer's Awareness Month, Diabetes Awareness Month, and Epilepsy Awareness Month. November is also Prostate Cancer, Men's Health Awareness Month, and Lung Cancer Awareness Month. When we look into our individual dates for the month of November, November 3rd marks Daylight Saving Time. Remember, we have to fall back an hour. November 7th through the 11th is International Stress Awareness Week. It is a global awareness holiday. And remember, we just did a podcast on stress. The last podcast was all about stress in education, so check that out. November 8th is National STEAM and STEM Day, which is technology, engineering, and math. So we're honoring those programs. So November 8th is STEM and STEAM Day. November 11th is National School Psychology Week, and that is actually November 11th through the 15th. So we want to recognize our school psychologists and the contributions that they do in our schools and supporting our students and helping find solutions for our students in our school system. November 11th is also Veterans Day. We want to recognize our veterans and the contributions that our veterans have done to honor our country and protect our country. November 11th is also my anniversary, so I want to say a special shout out to my hubby, Colin Smith. Happy anniversary, dear. It is our first year of marriage together on November 11th. November 13th is World Kindness Day. November 13th is also World Pancreatic Cancer Day, which is a global holiday. November 14th is World Diabetes Day within the United Nations. November 15th is American Recycles Day. So we want to make sure that we recycle and recognize recycling. November 17th is National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. That is November 17th through the 23rd. We want to make sure that we recognize hunger and homelessness in America and do whatever we can to help support and close that gap of homelessness and hunger in America. November 18th through the 22nd is American Education Week, and that week is an opportunity to celebrate public education and honor individuals who make a difference in education. November 20th is Education Support Professionals Day. November 20th is also World Children's Day. November 21st is National Parent Involvement Day. November 22nd is Substitute Educators Day. Let's celebrate our substitute teachers who come in our buildings and support us. And finally, the last holiday for November that we want to celebrate and recognize is Thanksgiving, which is November 28th, a time for us to gather with family and friends and be thankful for where we are in our lives. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And that is it for our dates to remember for the month of November. Now it's time for breaking news. The first story is dated October 1st, 2024. The U.S. Department of Education announced the distribution of $65.4 million in new awards to the Magnet Schools Assistance Program and $1.7 million under the Fostering Diverse Schools Demonstration Grant Program, FDS. This builds on the $20 million in MSAP grants released in May, marking the 70th anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education. Diversity is America's superpower, stated U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. These awards will enhance educational equity by supporting schools and building diverse communities. The MSAP awards will benefit 37 magnet schools by promoting desegregation and increasing family engagement. The FDS awards focus on voluntary efforts to cultivate more inclusive school environments. The department will highlight these awards and strategies for sustaining magnet schools at the 2024 Magnet Schools of America Fall Policy Training Conference in Arlington, Virginia. The full list is located on the site, and I will have that list and that link on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. Story 2, October 6, 2024, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights has proposed civil rights data information collection requests for the 2025 and 2027 school years now open for public comment. Since 1968, the department has collected data on student access to educational resources and school climate factors from public schools serving students from pre-K to 12th grades. Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, Catherine E. Lama, stated, "The civil rights data collection provides essential information for evaluating students' experiences in America's education public schools. We look forward to reviewing public comments and the proposed elements and data elements within those comments." New data items from 2025-2026 include informal removals of students from educational programs, the experience of students placed in private schools by their district, and the presence of threat assessment teams in schools. Additional comments and information, along with frequently asked questions, will all be on the link that I will provide. If you're interested in providing any update or any public comment for that collection request for 2025, 2026, and 2027 and 2028. Story 3 is dated October 21st, 2024. The U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, OCR, reached a resolution agreement with St. Johns County School District in Florida to ensure that restraint policies do not hinder students with disabilities from receiving a free and appropriate public education, FAPE. OCR identified significant compliance issues regarding the district's obligations under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Although the district has policies that prohibit seclusion and limit restraint to emergencies, they reported high rates of restraint among students with disabilities. Inaccuracies in record keeping further impeded the district's ability to comply with civil rights obligations, although OCR found no reports of student seclusion. Based on that, the following issues, the district has begun reducing its restraint and is committed to including the following in their current policies: convening IEP teams for students restrained in the past to evaluate their current needs, revising policies on restraint and seclusion, implementing a monthly monitoring program for restraint usage, providing staff training, and improving record-keeping practices. Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, Catherine Lehman, stated that St. John's School District has committed to ensuring civil rights of students with disabilities will be closely monitored moving forward, and the resolution letter will be located on the website. The reason why I brought up this story is for awareness. For my educators and my leaders, you want to make sure that your district has appropriate restraint and seclusion policies to make sure that students continue to receive FAPE and that you're not violating any policies. So that's the lesson from this whole story, just bringing that awareness about restraint and seclusion policies, making sure that you have those policies outlined. And then parents, if your child is restrained or secluded within your district, making sure that you know your rights and that the district can provide those communicated policies for restraint and seclusion. I am in no way penalizing, I'm strictly reporting what OCR found for St. Johns County District. And the purpose of this is to make sure that we raise awareness and that we use this information in this case to move forward and be better and make sure that we provide FAPE as school districts and that parents understand policies for restraint and seclusion in their district and ask those appropriate questions. The last story is story 4, dated October 21st, 2024. And this story, and it aligns with the last story in providing those resources and supports. The Office of Special Education Programs, Technical Assistance Centers offer resources to develop support and implement evidence-based practices, ensuring that infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities have successful school years, and that educators create welcoming, safe, and supporting environments where children can thrive. It's essential to adopt a proactive and positive strategies to promote social, emotional, and behavioral wellness. The resources provided from the Office of Special Education Program include resources that help support and apply proactive behavior practices that support academic advisement and student well-being. The federal guidelines and the reports includes the Center for Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, resources from the National Center on Pyramid Model Innovations, and the IRIS Center. Within that, there are various proactive behavior strategies and practices and resources for educators and parents to utilize these resources at the links that are provided from the U.S. Department of Education. I will have all of the links and all of 4 news stories located on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. And we want to make sure that we're proactive as districts and we have policies in place. And parents, you want to make sure that you're also using these resources and that you are aware, because the overall goal is to foster an inclusive learning environment where all students are safe, strategies are proactive, and that students' social, emotional, and academic well-being are being honored, along with that free and appropriate public education. And that will be it for our essential news. Now it's time for our essential knowledge. For today's essential knowledge, we are going to discuss neurodivergent learners. I was having a conversation with a parent, and she mentioned that her son was neurodivergent and that he was having some challenges in school. After that conversation, it made me ponder and reflect and do a little researching to learn more about neurodivergent learners and see if there was some information that I can share with my listeners about neurodivergent learners, what they are, how it all originated, and provide some context and some research about neurodiversity, neurodivergent learners, and all of this information as far as the neurodiversity, neurotypical research, the categories, services, and tips for parents and leaders. The first piece of research that I delved into was an article on verymindwell.com, and it discussed neurodiversity and neurodivergent. And it was written by Resnick in 2023. And when we think about neurodiversity is the idea that there are numerous ways in which people's brains process information and function, which can result in diverse behavioral presentations. Rather than viewing these differences as problematic, the concept of neurodiversity celebrates and embraces these diverse behavioral presentations, and it recognizes the differences in brain function and behavior traits that are simply indications of the vast diversity of the human population. Neurodiversity is a term coined by autistic sociologist Judy Singer in 1997, and it refers to two categories of people, neurotypical or neurodivergent individuals. Let's first discuss neurotypical people. Neurotypical people have brain functions, behaviors, and processes that are considered standard or typical to the social norm. They usually hit all of their developmental and behavioral milestones at the same time and the same age as most of the population. They move through life without having to wonder if their brains are different or if they're the same because they're following the norm as far as the way they think and their behaviors. People who are neurotypical may not even know that they're neurotypical because the subject has never come up to them before. So neurotypical are those standard people who follow the developmental and behavioral milestones of society in the same age as most people their age. When we're looking at neurodivergent individuals brains function differently in one or more ways that is considered standard or typical. They are very different and they manifest ranging from very mild ways to very obvious ways, which mean that people may notice that they behave differently and that they behave atypical from the standard in our society. When we're looking at the research and the numbers and how neurodivergent learners learn, looking at data, and according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, it highlighted autism spectrum disorder. And it stated autism spectrum disorder is believed to affect 1 in every 44 8-year-olds, which amounts to 2.3% of children in the age group. Boys are 4.2 times more likely to be diagnosed with the disorder than girls. And this is primarily due to the lack of understanding of how autism presents in genders that are often marginalized or underrepresented. The CDC also states that around 9.4% of all children are diagnosed with ADHD before the age of 18. And additionally, it mentioned information from the Yale Center of Dyslexia and Creativity that 20% of the population are affected by dyslexia based on that information from the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity. So these are some of those categories that are aligned under neurodivergent learners based on what I researched and what I've seen from the CDC. When we're looking at the categories for individuals that may be neurodivergent include autism, ADHD, Tourette's, dyspraxia, synesthesia, dyscalculia, Down syndrome, epilepsy, chronic mental health illnesses such as bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, borderline personality disorder, anxiety, and depression. Let's dive down into those categories and do a little definition dive of each one that are mentioned in the article and the research that I read. When we're looking at ADHD, individuals may struggle with attention and managing thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Autism, also called autism spectrum disorder, includes a broad range of conditions that may include challenges with socializing and social skills, causing repetitive behaviors and trigger speech difficulties, which in some cases may lead to an individual to communicate only non-verbally. Dyslexia include the misreading, miswriting or misspeaking of certain items, confusion with letters, misunderstanding of word organization or pronunciation, and having trouble following directions. Dyscalculia is the misunderstanding of math concepts, such as confusion when reading numbers or symbols, and the inability to consistently remember numbers, math facts, rules, and procedures, or trouble with mental figuring. Dysgraphia is a learning disability that involves writing, and it usually involves support such as a pencil grip and body position, illegible handwriting, and an aversion to writing or drawing. Down syndrome, this condition, individuals are born with an extra chromosome that ultimately changes their body and brain development and may lead to mental or physical challenges. If you've been diagnosed with any of these conditions, you could be considered or would be considered neurodivergent. Neurodivergent people are affected in various ways. And as I was reading, I saw this information from a Dr. Boxley, and she is the director of the clinical neuropsychology training in the Department of Psychiatric and Behavioral Health at Ohio State University School of Medicine. And she describes neurodiversity as the belief that individuals interact with the world in unique ways, sometimes in ways that are not considered typical. And it is also based on the principle that different is not synonymous with deficient. According to Dr. Boxley, neurodivergence is a social theory rather than a diagnosis. While individuals can choose to identify themselves as neurodivergent, it's not appropriate to label others as neurodivergent without their consent. Additionally, she mentions that not everyone with a medical diagnosis like autism or ADHD identifies as neurodivergent. Furthermore, there's no standard definition of what constitutes a neurotypical brain. I thought that was important to point out that I saw that part and that information in the article based on neurodivergent and a neurotypical brain. When we're looking at school services for students and how to help support individuals who may be neurodivergent learners, we're looking at the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which we call the DSM-5 in schools, and it provides a set of general criteria to reference when determining the level of intervention required to aid a person who has neurodiversity. So in that manual, that's when a school psychologist may pull it out and they talk through and it lists 5 primary levels of measurement, highlighting key contributing factors such as social communication and restrictive, repetitive, and or sensory behavior and interests, according to that DSM manual. The checklist will be helpful for parents and medical professionals to determine the level of support and intervention required to help an individual learn and succeed in a manner that works with their unique abilities. When we're looking at school services, we want to make sure that we're having that conversation with educators and the school psychologists, and that we look at those checklists to see ways that we can intervene and support students who are neurodivergent learners in the school setting. I know the information today is very brief, but I wanted to just touch on it because it seems like neurodivergent learners is something that is very wide, and it's like autism. It's a big umbrella. So there are many theories around it based on what I'm researching. What I want to provide now is some essential tips for parents and essential tips for educators and leaders on ways to support neurodivergent learners. Tips for parents of neurodivergent learners. The first thing you want to do is educate yourself. You want to learn about your child's neurodivergent condition. You want to understand the characteristics, the challenges, and the strengths to support your child. And then you want to advocate for your child's needs within the educational system. So work closely with teachers and staff. See if they can pull interventions and help support and provide appropriate accommodations and support for your child if you feel your child is a neurodivergent learner. That may be an intervention plan, an individual education plan, or a Section 504 plan. You also want to build a support network and connect with other parents of neurodivergent children. Share your experiences, advice, and resources, and collaboratively network to support each other and gain insights. Also, encourage independence with your child. You want to foster independence by teaching your child those essential life skills, and then you accommodate as well by breaking those tasks into manageable parts and guide as needed. You want to establish some predictable routines. When you work with neurodivergent learners or you're working with any child, it's really important to have that structured, predictable daily routine. Consistency helps neurodivergent children feel secure and can reduce anxiety. Make sure that you use direct and clear communication with your child. You may be explicit about your expectations, encourage your child to express their feelings and thoughts, and then you may use visual aids, social stories, and charts to enhance understanding. As a parent, you also want to be flexible and patient. So understand that neurodivergent children may have different paces and different learning styles. So be patient and open to adapting your approach based on your child's needs. You want to celebrate those achievements, acknowledge and celebrate your child's achievements, no matter how small. You want to always positively reinforce and help build their self-esteem at home. You want to model acceptance. So embrace neurodiversity within your family and teach siblings and extended family members to appreciate and understand those differences. We want to work collaboratively with professionals. Make sure that we're collaborating with therapists, educators, your medical professionals, people within your child's care, and stay informed about your child's progress and collaborate on strategies that can be implemented consistently at the home and school. And then finally, parents, I want you to take care of yourself. Taking care of yourself and being a parent of a child who is neurodivergent can be challenging. So you want to make sure that you take care of yourself, you prioritize your well-being so you can pour into your child. You can't pour into others if you don't have yourself built up. So make sure that you practice self-care. So just a recap of the tips for parents: educate yourself, advocate for your child, build a support network, encourage independence, establish predictable routines, provide clear, consistent communication, be patient and flexible, celebrate achievements, encourage social skills. Also, sensory considerations, make sure you're aware of those sensory considerations and sensitivities for your child. You want to create a sensory-friendly home by minimizing noise and providing comfortable textures and accommodating sensory needs. If you're neurodivergent, have those sensory needs. And then finally, you want to model acceptance and work collaboratively and practice self-care. So those are my tips for parents. When we're looking at my tips for educators, you want to make sure that you're supporting neurodiverse learners by creating inclusive and effective learning environments. As educators, you have to educate yourself about neurodivergent conditions such as autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, and others. As an educator, you want to recognize that neurodivergent individuals have unique strengths and challenges. If you have a student who is neurodivergent who has an IEP or 504 plan, you want to make sure that you're accommodating and following those plans. Educators should also attend workshops and training sessions on neurodiversity to stay informed about the best practices and the latest research on support neurodivergent students. To help neurodivergent learners, educators should break down tasks into smaller, more manageable steps, use clear and concise language. Also use visual aids, charts, written instructions, all those things that may be aligned in the IEP or just those best teaching practices to help support neurodivergent learners. You want to make sure that you have classroom routines, clear communication, routines and schedules that a neurodivergent learner can follow and use, which include visual cues or timers to help support transitions and changes that may come in advance. The other thing you want to do is make sure that you tailor your teaching methods to support their individual needs. I mentioned the 504 and the IEP, so you're going to do that through accommodation, but then also making sure that you provide those multiple modalities of learning for students so they can tap into their individual needs and preferences in your teaching methods. And then you want to make sure that you have a sensory-friendly environment with minimal distractions to provide those necessary sensory tools to help support students who are neurodivergent learners in the classroom environment. One thing I do want to highlight is Cynthia Martin, who is a clinical psychologist. She mentioned some ways that educators can set up their classrooms. And she said that there are 3 fundamental areas where neurodivergent students of all ages need support. And she mentioned behavioral issues, social challenges, and executive functioning. Under behavior issues, she mentioned that there are some behavior tips that you can provide, which include visual supports, starting the day with breathing and relaxation exercises, having a relaxing area in the classroom, having a safe space or a safe person for the student to go to, scheduling movement breaks, preferential seating, and then providing those fidget toys or wiggle seats for those students who have to move while they're learning. So those are some tips that she established and provided as far as behavior tips to help support neurodivergent learners. When we're looking at executive functioning is how a student thinks. And some things that educators can do is help with checklists, to help reminders, dedicate binders for every subject, or have some type of visual system so that student can go back and use that visual system to help. We're having a reward system in place, using timers in the classroom to help challenge tasks and give a countdown on what's going to happen next, having those planners and calendars and online planners as a backup. Students with executive functioning, they need a lot of reminders and a lot of visuals to help channel the day and mark things off. That's really important. And then those students with social challenges, neurodivergent students with social challenges, she recommend mentoring programs, lunch bunches, praising kids for being inclusive, coaching kids, and having students learn from each other with good peer models. So allowing those social activities inside and outside the classroom to help support those social challenges a neurodivergent learner may struggle with. So those were the three things that she mentioned: behavioral, executive functioning, and social challenge supports. As far as my leaders and my teachers, you want to work with neurodivergent students. You want to have empathy, flexibility, and an inclusive mindset. School administrators, teachers, and program coordinators can follow some tips to help support an overall inclusive environment. And the first thing I would like to say is promote inclusivity. So foster inclusion in your classrooms and in the entire school, in the entire learning environment where all students feel safe and supported and accepted. You want to also provide professional development and ongoing professional development opportunities for educators and for leaders to help enhance the understanding of neurodiversity. Having those training sessions, PD, PLCs, those things to help promote communication strategies and create inclusive learning environments. So you want to have that professional development aligned with that. Understanding and making sure your teachers and you as a leader understand those individualized support plans. So make sure that the teachers are collaborating and that the parents are collaborating with the teachers, and that the teachers and the parents are on one accord to make sure that they follow plans. And those plans are tailored to support the student's neurodivergent need with accommodations and strategies that are aligned to the student's needs, whether it's an IEP, intervention plan, or a Section 504 plan. Make sure that your whole school environment and that your school building is accessible and has accessible learning materials. So not only physically accessible, but also make sure that there are materials that honor multiple modalities for learnings for students who may be neurodivergent learners, with formats such as visual, audio, interactive to accommodate those diverse learning styles. The next thing, we want to make sure that teachers, we're going to go back to PD and have those flexible teaching strategies, and they understand flexible teaching strategies, and that they're able to cater to the different learning preferences and incorporate those tools and aids, such as visual aids and hands-on learning and alternative assessment, to incorporate visual aids, hands-on activities, and alternative assessment to help support students' different learning preferences. The next is communication. We want to make sure that there are transparent and open communication channels with the school and the parents, and that parents are informed about their child's progress, challenges, and supports available within the school. The final two strategies for educators and leaders include professional collaboration. You want to encourage collaboration between the gen ed teachers, special education teachers, and support staff to foster a team approach to address the diverse needs of neurodivergent students. We want to make sure that we're honoring behavior support plans, and we're collaborating with the behavior specialists and psychologists to develop and implement personalized behavior supports that focus on positive reinforcement strategies. And then finally, overall, we want to make sure that we promote self-efficacy for the kids and have those regular check-ins, which kind of goes back to the communication. So those are some tips for educators and leaders when we're looking at supporting neurodivergent students in our building. For our book excerpt for today, I wanted to highlight some books that tap into neurodivergent learners. The first include Look Me in the Eye, My Life with Asperger's, Thinking in Pictures, and Funny, You Don't Look Autistic. These books are about personal accounts of being neurodivergent. Some fictional books with neurodivergent main characters include Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, Flowers for Abner, and On the Edge of Gone. So check those books out. Then we want to look at some nonfiction books about neurodivergent and the future of neurodiversity. And those books that I have here include Neurotribes, Neurodiversity, Discovering the Extraordinary Gift of Autism, ADHD, and Dyslexia, and Other Brain Differences. And then the final book is Divergent Mind. So as I stated, there are some books that highlight characters, personal accounts, and then nonfiction topics related to neurodiversity to help tap into and learn more about the topic. I always want to encourage you to check out my books as well. Some of the topics under neurodivergent are highlighted in all of my Essential Tips books. So Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders, Essential Tips for Educators, Parents, and Coordinators, Autism, ADHD, all of those topics and how to support students with those exceptionalities are all in my Essential Tips books. So I do want to provide that context as well, because purchasing one of my books will help you with students who fall under those neurodiversity categories. Now it's time for our word of wisdom as we close out today's episode. And the word of wisdom for today is, it is not our difference that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. And that comes from Audre Lorde. I want to continue to encourage you to get Essential and subscribe to the Edufaith Consulting website and the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. Call to action. Thank you for your support as always, but I'm calling you to subscribe to the YouTube page and at www.edufaithconsulting.com. Get Essential.
You got mail.
Now it's time for our essential advice, Ask Dr. Nakia, or Share an Inspirational Story. I want to use this platform to support and spotlight fellow educators, families, and community members. If you have a question, want advice, or to share a wonderful inspirational story on this podcast, feel free to email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. That is EDUFAIT4ALL@gmail.com. May read your letter, provide advice, or share your story on this podcast. Disclaimer, all listeners should adhere to district policies, follow protocols, remain ethical, and adhere to guidelines in the best interest of children. Edufaith Essentials does not assume responsibility or is legally responsible for anyone's actions based on information provided on this podcast. I want to encourage you to get Essential. Go to www.edufaithconsulting.com to see what Edufaith Educational Services has to offer. I have valuable resources, information, and a blog that you can subscribe to and find out more essential tips and resources. Go to www.edufaithconsulting.com and subscribe to the Edufaith Educational Services page. Get Essential. This podcast is brought to you by Edufaith Educational Services. Some services offered through Edufaith Consulting include consulting and advocacy for parents, consulting for educators, leaders, and school districts, college accommodation advocacy, consulting and training, advocacy in supporting individuals with college accommodations at the post-secondary level, as well as university trainings to support individuals with disabilities and services, parent education trainings, college and career coaching for students who are entering the workforce or the post-secondary college setting, business and district professional development and trainings for churches, nonprofits, businesses, districts, and communities, specializing in services for diverse learners, including students with disabilities, interventions under the multi-tier system of support, English speakers of other languages, education and leadership coaching, program development under services under IDEA, Section 504, trainings, diverse learners, and Essential Tips books. Feel free to go to www.edufaithconsulting.com to view all the services that Edufaith Educational Services. I want to encourage my believers to be blessed. All others, be kind, be well, and be the change. Follow Edufaith on social media. Twitter, EdufaithS. On Instagram, Edufaith 2021. On LinkedIn, Edufaith Educational Services. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting Edufaith Educational Services and the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Subscribe and follow Edufaith Essentials on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page and listen to the Edufaith Essentials podcast on all streaming platforms. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Have a wonderful day and get Essential.